Alabama A&M has fired Connell Maynor, and when evaluating his career as the Bulldogs head coach, I think it's best if you divide his tenure into two different eras. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode by making good on what was yesterday's mistake, and I'll explain that. But we're going to look at the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year co-champions, Andrew Jones and Kelby Givens. Prior to that, we'll take a look at Tennessee State. This was going to be our opening segment, their season being over and ending in the FCS playoffs, and then Connell Maynor was relieved of his duties by Alabama A&M. This one was really interesting to me. I was on Fox 54, right? I was on Fox 54 yesterday. I believe, I don't know when it's going to air. I recorded it yesterday. It probably aired yesterday. But if you're in Huntsville, hope you see my face. How you doing? You'll see I'm still wearing the same crew neck. Shout out Puffington, black-owned business out of Minnesota. So shout out to them. Anyway, I was asked about it, and I can't say I was overly surprised. I don't think the decision to let go of Connell Maynor should take many people by surprise. Not even Connell Maynor himself. I think it was a clear level of pressure. And one of the things that we talked about on that show is the new athletic director. And I kind of compared this to Prairie View A&M releasing Bubba McDowell, or not renewing his contract, but just moving on from a head coach. When you have a new athletic director, they don't have that tie to you. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You don't get the I like this guy treatment a lot of times. So do I think that was it? The whole story? No, but that's one of the things that we talked about, how much of that had to play in the decision to move on from Connell Maynor. To me, no matter who the AD was, you look at the track record of what Maynor has done recently, and I think it has warranted a releasing. I think it is warranted moving on to a new head coach, in my opinion. I wouldn't have complained regardless. When I'm looking at Connell Maynor's track record, I'm dividing it up into two eras. You have the Akil Glass era and the post-Glass era. If you're going to look at what Connell Maynard did at Alabama A&M, it's a clear line when things turn. It's a clear pivot point. You have the Glass era, which was from 2018 until 2021. And then you have the post-Glass era from 2022 to present day 2024. That latter era isn't that good. Let's look at it. And to be fair, I think it's important to give Maynor and Dwayne Taylor some credit for the maturation of Akil Glass, because Glass was there a year before. It was his true freshman season, but he played, and you saw him improve. So I do think that it's important to give him some of the credit. That's how I feel, right? It's not just, oh, Glass made you. No, we had a perfect marriage, and it worked for Alabama A&M. I think that's the much more appropriate way to phrase it. Akil Glass did not make Connell Maynor. They just haven't been able to find another quarterback, and it's difficult to win when you can't find a guy. But let's look at what Glass did before Maynor. He had 1,192 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. That was his freshman stat line. His sophomore season, which is when Maynor and Taylor gets there, 2,421 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. So you see a skyrocket in touchdowns, you see a skyrocket in yards, and you see a slight drop in interceptions. Then you get to the 2019 season, and that's when he really ticks it up. 3,600 yards, 32 touchdowns, 11 yards. 11 interceptions. So the interceptions go up, but the targets go up, or the attempts go up, the yardage goes up, the touchdowns go up, even the games went up, right? So everything skyrockets in 2019. Then you get to the spring season. Spring season, he goes 1,355, right? 1,355 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That small sample size in the spring was more productive than what he did his freshman season. So you see him continuously getting better in the best season of all, because he played less games in the fall of 2021 than he did in the fall of 2019. Glass ends with 3,568 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions on 2 less games. I believe he played 10 games that year opposed to 12 the year prior, but it was definitely at least one, but I believe it was 2. You're looking at 32 less yards, 4 more touchdowns, 4 less interceptions. That's the year for Akil Glass, right? And the success of Alabama A&M was high at that time. They were 6-5 in 2018, 5-2 in the conference, second in the division. 2019, 7-5, 4-3 in conference, second in the division. That SWAC season in the spring, they went 5-0. They won the SWAC title. Then you looking in the fall of 21, 7-3, 5-3 in conference play, third overall in the division. And that's the year where it's Alabama A&M, or excuse me, that's the year when it's FAMU and then Jackson State clearly head and shoulders above everybody else. This is a respectable tenure. That's the first era. But then you get to the second era, right? Like, we remember this. We're dividing the eras into 2 separate sections, with Akil Glass, outside of Akil Glass. Then you go to 2022. You're 4-7, 4-4 in the conference, 4th in the division. 2023, 5-6 overall, 3-5 in the division. Excuse me, in the conference, 4th in the division. 2024, 6-6 overall, 4-4 in the conference, 4th in the division. There's a clear distinction here. When you have Akil Glass, Connell Maynor and the Alabama A&M Bulldogs went 5-2, 4-3, 5-0 in that spring season, 5-3. That's 4 years, 1 SWAC title in that spring year, whatever you want to call it. That was a successful season. The other 3 years, winning records. Akil Glass leaves 4-4, 3-5, 4-4. You see what I'm saying? You go from being second or third in the division to being 4th in the division. And I was asked this question on Fox 54. And I phrased it this way. When you're 4th in the division, you're not in the conversation of competing with Alabama with FAMU and Jackson State. Alabama State was there. Alabama State was not as good as those 2 teams, but it was like, hey man, could they compete? Could they compete? I felt like they had close games. The games were competitive, right? Like, it's not necessarily, and coming into the season, we felt like Alabama State could be a player. At no point did I feel like Alabama A&M was any sort of threat. Never did I feel like, okay, if those top 2 weren't the top 2, maybe. No, that was not it. When you divide the 2 eras, when you divide Connell Maynard's tenure into 2 eras, you have Akil Glass, highlight offense, winning records, top of the division conversations. After Akil Glass, I don't like the way that they treated the quarterback play. I don't. I think that they had no leash. I think it was way too erratic. I didn't think they stuck with a guy enough, and I thought it was harmful to the development of young quarterbacks. I did not like the way that they used their quarterbacks after Akil Glass. Maybe you just couldn't find a guy. Doesn't help that you didn't really try to develop them with game reps, in my opinion, to the degree that they should have been. But anyway, post Akil Glass, shaky quarterback play, not really much development, erratic treatment of the quarterbacks. Then you have 500 and less than 500 records. You're 4th. The only teams that you're above are Mississippi Valley State and Bethune-Cookman. I don't care if you're above them. Do I need to have you at 5th to panic? No. You weren't a part of that conversation with the top 2, or even a team that could who you weren't even considered a team who could climb into that top 2 or make it a big 3. All right. That's the problem. That is the issue, in my opinion. Everything in totality. What have you done since Akil Glass left? And when you look at that resume, it's not good. Connell Maynor once said, I get paid to win SWAC games. Well, you kept cash and checks as long as Akil Glass was there. Once he left, you were 4-4, 3-5, 4-4. If you get paid to win SWAC games, you got to win the SWAC games. And when you don't get paid. And that's how we're sitting here today. Now, as we push forward, let's look at Tennessee State. We're talking about people who get paid to win games. Boy, Eddie George gets paid to win them, and he won them. But unfortunately, the season is over. He had a lot of big-time wins. Saturday, unfortunately, was not one of them. But I want to break down that game in total as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football or Locked On ACC. I really do like the Locked On ACC play this week because they had a crazy situation this weekend, and you seen that Locked On or that ACC championship. It looks a lot different than we thought that it would. So, yeah, check that out. This is interesting to me. Anywho, Tennessee State falls to Montana in the first round of the FCS playoffs, and let's get the obvious out the way first. And maybe it's not so obvious. I don't know if people are talking about this, but when you look at the stat sheet, it is obvious. If you allow 2 punt return touchdowns, 9 times out of 10, you're not winning that game, right? Like you're just not going to come out victorious in the majority of games in which you allow a punt return touchdown. And then when you allow 2 of them, it almost seals your fate. So you got to give a little bit of credit. And I would say this, Junior Bergen, who is the Montana player who returned both of the touchdowns, both of the punt returns for touchdowns. He did them at the right time. One, you were up 13. Boom, you expand this to a 21-point game. Things feel different. When you expand the game from 13 to 21 points at the end of the third quarter, you feel like you're going to go into the fourth quarter with a 21-point lead. It didn't end up happening that way because TSU struck quickly, but you feel as if you're going to go in with a 21-point lead and you feel very confident. Up 21 going into the fourth, you're supposed to win that game. Anyway, TSU end up striking quick. Boom, boom. And now the game gets shortened into a 7-point game early in the fourth. That's how the cookie crumbled. They got back into the game quickly. Junior Bergen, not immediately, well into the fourth quarter, like halfway through, he returns another kick and opens his game to a 14-point matchup. That's going to be huge because we're going to look at the offense and how, despite the fact that they put up 27 points, I never really felt like they got flowing. I never really felt like they got going offensively. But those are very timely plays for Montana. And here's the other thing. The big matchup that we pointed out was Tennessee State's run defense versus Montana's running game. That was the matchup that we pointed out. And remember, I framed it as the complete opposite of the week prior. Against SEMO brought in all these wide receivers. They had 3 wide receivers over 700 yards. I want to see, how do you stop a powerful wide receiving core? Well, Tennessee State stops the pass really well. That's the best. They're the best pass defense in the Big South OVC. You're looking at SEMO, the best pass offense in the OVC, the Big South OVC. So with that being the case, now it's strength versus strength. It's big on big. It wasn't that case this week. Tennessee State ain't a great run defense. They get a good amount of tackles for a loss. You got to salute them on that. But they're not a great run defense. And you saw that this week, in my opinion. And, we talk about timeliness. And you may tell me, well, the run numbers for Montana are a little bit skewed. You end up with 136 yards, 59 of that comes at the end of the game. Okay, fine. So you're at 4 nearly 5 yards a pop instead of the 6.8 that he ends with. But Eli Gilman gets a 59-yard run to ice the game. That's something you can't allow. To me, that's a sign of a bad run defense. And that's okay. Like, it's a bad play, but you don't get to let up that play and then say, it wasn't really. You don't get to say that. Don't tell me, it wasn't really that bad. He just had an explosive play. If that explosive play ices the game, I'm all for saying, hey, you had a big play that consumes the majority of your yardage. But if that big play is the game sealer, That's not the talking point that we're using today, right? I'm actually going to use that point against Tennessee State because if you flip the script and you look at how they ran the football, it was putrid. It was putrid. What I said, Eli Gilman had a 59-yard run. Jaden McGill and CJ Evans combined had 52 yards total on 12 carries. And is that a lot of carries? No. But when you look at it, Jaden McGill, he ended with 20, actually ended with the same stat sheet, 6 for 26. But McGill had a 21-yard run, which means on the other 5 carries, he got 5 yards. CJ Evans, 6 for 26. He had a 17-yard run. On the other 5 carries, he had 9 yards. So you're looking at a offense that really couldn't run the football. And in general, I don't think that the offense ever got going. I know they put up this amount of yardage, but man, you look at it. Let's go through Tennessee State's drives. It was 27-6 in the third quarter. Then you start putting up you get a 12-yard touchdown pass on the first drive, right? Like on the first play of the drive. So you were inside the red zone already. Then you get the football back on a fumble. You're inside the red zone. So you score 2 touchdowns back to back, 12 yards, 11 yards, 1 play drives. But that's it. Like when you look at it, it wasn't a long drive. You didn't really have to drive the football. Then you get another touchdown where you go 11 for 75. Cool, I'll give you that. But the majority of their points that they put up were not from drives. You have a 10-play, 57-yard drive leads to a field goal. You have a 5-play, 28-yard drive leads to a field goal. You have a 1-play, 12-yard drive, a 1-play, 11-yard drive. Both were touchdowns. Then you get an 11 for 75. That's a touchdown. And then the next one, you go 5 for 54 and you throw an interception. I don't think that this offense was nearly as consistent as the 27 points would suggest. They got some favorable opportunities in that third quarter to make it close. But when that touchdown happened, when I seen that touchdown, I said, oh, yeah, it's over. It was over. I didn't think that, honestly, after that kickoff or after that punt return, where it was 27-6, I thought it was over because the offense just was not flowing on that day. That's the thing. It just was not flowing on that day. Anywho, though, I thought that Draylon Ellis looked pretty solid at times. I thought he made some plays late. You saw some flashes. I didn't think that the offense was great, so I can't give him too much praise. Shout out to Sanders Ellis as well. He had 2 fumble recoveries and 3 tackles for a loss, so he was making an impact on defense at times. But in general, it just wasn't enough. And when you allow 2 punt returns for a touchdown, you're going to lose that game 9 times out of 10. It was a disappointing end to a really great season. I think that Tennessee State has built up some cachet, and I'm looking forward to what they're able to do next year. Because I think that they defeated a lot of the expectations, and I can see them building on this. They just got to make sure they get a quarterback. They got to get another quarterback. But because Draylon Ellis is going to be a hard guy to replace. He is. Anywho, the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year has been announced, and it's 2 men, Andrew Jones, Kelby Givens. They couldn't divide the 2, and I'm actually supportive of the co-award winners, which you're not going to hear me say often. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the official place the only place that I would go for all of my ticket needs. I don't care if I'm trying to go see Hamilton, right? My girl put me on the Alexander Hamilton. If I want to go see that, I'm going to Game Time. So if I want to go see myself a musical, if I want to go to the theater, if I want to go to a football game, a basketball game, a hockey game, we got all of those in the area. So I could go to any of the 3. I go to any other 3. Got baseball too. It just ain't in right now. One of the few cities or areas, right? Because the AMA only houses 2 of those, but one of the few areas that has all 4 of the major sports. I can get all of them on Game Time. You may not have all 4, but you can get the ones that you do have on Game Time. You got to download the app, though. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $20 off your first purchase, and you ain't never going to stop going back. I promise you that. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to Saving 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. So yesterday's episode was clearly done prior to Monday morning. Because Monday morning, the SWAC announced their Defensive Player of the Year. I was heated. I had already recorded. I had no way to get back to my recording gear until late tonight, right? This is late Monday that I'm recording this. So I didn't have a lot of opportunities. I couldn't go in. It was either interrupt that recording and say, hey, let me cut in real quick. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing it. I thought that was a really good segment, though. Like, here's the thing is I thought that segment about the Defensive Player of the Year being so close in a matter of preference, it was informative. I thought it was entertaining. I'm really sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but I'm really not. I thought it was informative. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was everything but timely, honestly. But I left it in there because I enjoyed it so much and I thought it still had value. So I try to phrase that, and I hope that you can remember it, not as the person who broke down the defensive player race after the defensive player was already announced, but instead giving you my ballot. What my ballot, if I had a vote, this is who I would have voted for in the order, because I think overall it's a compilation of different ballots, and you get the point system. That's what I think happens. I'm not in those rooms, so I can't confirm nor deny. Godly, I got some in my eye bad, but it's okay. We're going to thug it out to the end of the episode. To me, I would have had Andrew Jones, James Burgess, Kelby Givens, and then Traquan Thomas. What did the ballots end up being? It ended up being Andrew Jones and Kelby Givens tied. I'm okay with this because if you look at the premise of yesterday's episode, it was all about the fact that this is a matter of preference. What are you looking for? So let's say we have 10 people in the room. Who is the best SWAC defensive player this year? I could easily see five saying Andrew Jones was the best because of his ability to get a whole bunch of tackles, his ability to get in the backfield, his ability to operate in space, right? I could see that. I could see 5 people saying Kelby Givens. He was so disruptive. Look at his tackles for loss numbers. Look at his sack numbers. He had double digits in both categories. I could see that, right? So as I could see 10 people in the room, half of them saying Andrew Jones' ability to be a tackling machine, covering space, get behind the line of scrimmage, just an overall impact player from the linebacker position. That's the best player. 5 saying Kelby Givens' ability to rack up tackles for a loss, impact the game and the running in the pass. I could see all of that. I could also see some of them coming and saying, yeah, James Bergen was an absolute lockdown corner. I could see them saying Traquan Thomas had the most sacks. I think that's the hardest sell just because him and Givens do the same thing, and Givens did more in the run department, way more, and he was close in the pass department. I do think that that's a little bit different, but overall, those votes could go any kind of direction, in my opinion. So I left that up. The reason I'm okay with Jones and Givens is because those are the 2 most valuable things to voters in these type of awards. Tackles and sacks. If you can get a boatload of tackles on a really good defense, which I wouldn't say Grambling was a really good defense, but I would say that they were a standout defense in the sense that they forced a ton of turnovers. Matter of fact, I almost feel like him getting, as I'm thinking about it, Andrew Jones getting this award on Grambling's defense that, despite the turnovers, yardage-wise, they weren't great. Yeah, you don't typically get this if your team's not that successful. So you got to really salute Andrew Jones when you think about it. And then with Givens, he leads the league in disruptive numbers. And I feel a little bit validated because if you ask me, which you didn't, but you listened, hopefully, on yesterday's episode, I tell you, Andrew Jones is I did tell this on yesterday's episode, actually. Andrew Jones will be my SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, but I believe they'll give it to Kelby Givens. They said we can't decide. We're going to give it to Andrew Jones and Kelby Givens. So I feel like the guy I think should have won and the guy I predicted would win, they both came in and won. I feel validated in everything that I said, right? Like sometimes you just need people to just be like, yeah, you're right. And no one ever tells me I was right. This rare. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to say nobody. Some of y'all be showing love in the comments, and I love you too. But it is rare that I just get it. You right. You right. But when the SWAC tell you you're right, then you're right. I love it. But yeah, I just think it's hard to say that Givens had a better year than Andrew Jones with full conviction. And I think it's hard to say the other way as well. Like I think it's hard to say Jones had a better year than Givens with full conviction. So I'm okay with the co. I do want to say James Burgess. I just think that he plays cornerback, and it's a position that doesn't really get love in these type of awards. He had 4 interceptions. I guess that it's not a crazy amount. Be a lockdown corner, and he can't be forgotten in the mix of this conversation. That's how Darian feels. James Burgess was never going to win this award because he's a cornerback, and tackles and sacks just stand out more. But in general, James Burgess is one of the best defensive players in the country. I'm gonna leave it at that. In the meantime, in between time, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll be looking at we'll do a modified HBCU circuit. I don't think that I'm gonna do every team. I'll probably do a handful. The teams that played. Yeah, Alabama A&M played. It'd probably just be the teams that played this week, to be honest. So you're looking at the Bayou Classic, you're looking at the Turkey Day Classic, and you're looking at the rescheduled FAMU versus Alabama A&M game. That's 5 teams. I'll probably just do that for segment 1. Hit a little HBCU circuit real quick, and then dodge to something else, whatever that may be. But in the meantime, between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.